Welcome everybody. My name is Brian Hill. I am the Chief Revenue Officer of Imperium Data. Welcome to our first in our series of Fireside Chats. I'm very grateful here today to be here with Michael Wynston, Director of Global Architecture for Fiserv and friend of the company. Michael is also the leader of the Florida Network User Group, where we'll be putting on an event this evening for network engineers and those who are passionate about the IT and networking industry. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me here, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's always great to have people who are passionate about the industry, passionate about supporting the things that are making our modern infrastructure grow here in-house to have a chat. One of the things I wanted to lead off with today is kind of the theme of our event tonight, intent-based networking. What, to you, is networking with intention?
Okay. So, networking with intention, intent-based networking, is more than just one thing. A lot of times you'll hear about automation, orchestration, you'll hear about single source of truth, and how you manage your infrastructure. Everything every network engineer configures, all of the environments that the network architecture or security teams design, has a intention. The intention is the outcome that you want that infrastructure to create. With intent-based networking, really what it's focused on is ensuring the outcome that you are working towards when you're building your infrastructure is always the outcome that the infrastructure is creating. Hence the intent, what you are intending to do, is what the infrastructure is actually performing.
Very interesting. From a networking theoretical standpoint, I understand that. From a practice standpoint, and actually putting that into practice in a modern IT enterprise, what are the steps that go into that and kind of orchestrating that on the ground floor?
So it's important when you're designing any piece of infrastructure that you always understand what the objectives are, what the outcome is supposed to be. Quite often as architects and engineers, we get caught up in the, I want to use a router with this, I want to use 100 gig or 400 gig interfaces. I want to use a firewall that has layer 7 capabilities, or the functions of the actual device, and not in the outcome we're trying to create. With intent-based networking, by defining the outcome, you're able to ensure that the infrastructure is always performing based on what you're trying to achieve. So a simple example, if I'm connecting to some internet service provider and we're exchanging routes through BGP, then yes, a function of that is exchanging routes via BGP, and the outcome is you can send traffic out and receive traffic in from the internet. Therefore, an intent-based networking system would not only validate that your BGP is configured correctly, but also that you're able to actually exchange routes, and that when the routes are exchanged, you're able to reach your destination out on the internet.
As far as the measurables of actually putting something or a practice or a plan in place to that, now I'm sure that the higher ups within your organization, or even different product line leaders, how do you say this is how we're going about achieving intent-based networking, and these are our goals and our measurables to be able to work towards our goal?
Well, so it's really easy with intent-based networking when you're dealing with a small subset of your infrastructure. The challenge is today, our infrastructure is growing so fast, whether it's through mergers and acquisitions, or it's through integration with public cloud, or it's integration with containers, or it's integration with any one of the new technologies that seem to show up every few minutes. And ensuring that what you built yesterday, and now what you have to build today, yesterday's intent with that infrastructure is not somehow violated or reduced because of the new infrastructure that you're putting in place. So if I were to put in place to the new infrastructure, say connectivity to public cloud, I'm going to make sure that that connectivity to public cloud doesn't somehow change the outcome of the connectivity to the internet. When you speak to senior leadership, They don't know what does BGP mean. What is firewall? I understand firewall. Yeah, that stops things. No. So it's important to always focus on the business outcomes. And quite often, getting leadership to sign off on any initiative is a need for focusing on the business outcomes. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to money. You're asking for money, you're helping to generate money, or if your intent is violated, you're potentially causing your company to lose money.
Such an interesting dynamic within a corporation to be in, because you have to be a forward-thinking technical leader, but you also have to be able to put your business hat on to be able to justify it, justify the spend, justify the use case, and then be able to execute upon that to somebody who necessarily might not have the same technical acumen that you have.
Well, so I am surrounded at work by people who are far smarter than me and far better at engineering and architecture than I am. I have a global team of 15 who we had a reorg on Friday, so now I took on security and automation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So my team has nearly tripled in size. So if I look a little panicked, anyway.
They tripled your salary though, right?
Well, with great power comes great responsibility and no additional revenue. Yeah, that's okay. But I'm excited, looking forward to the jobs. But back to what I was saying, it's important to understand that everything every company does is, even you're a nonprofit, about generating revenue, right? And as a technologist, it's easy to get lost in the, wow, that's so cool. We couldn't do that last year with what we bought. But focusing on the business outcome makes it far easier to validate the choices that you make are the right choices for the business. Because at the end of the day, if you help your company generate more revenue, somehow that comes back to you, whether it's in, as you said, the form of a higher salary, or it's more responsibility, or it's opportunities to do something different within the organization.
That's incredibly insightful to hear, and it's great to hear from, for us as a value-added reseller and a sales perspective, that's exactly the type of mindset that I need our young salespeople to be able to understand. How can you present yourself in Imperium Data in a way that helps drive more positive business outcomes for our customers? And to hear that from your perspective, it's so validating of what we're trying to do here at Imperium Data in coaching a consultative approach to ask better questions of how we can create better business outcomes and drive more revenue collectively for everybody.
That's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Oh. So that's really important, because at the end of the day, if you go for something based on price, you buy cheap, you get cheap. And whether you're buying the same piece of infrastructure from value-added reseller A or value-added reseller B, it's the same infrastructure. It came from the same company, it came from the same manufacturing plant. What you should always look for, what I always look for, is a integrator, value-added reseller who comes focused on my business outcomes, comes focused on the solutions that we're trying to create for the businesses in order to generate revenue.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what's really important.
So earlier you had mentioned, there's so many new technologies in the market. There's so many, evolving either product lines, new security platforms. How can you and your team, ever growing, continue to stay ahead and evaluate new technologies? What does that process look like for you guys internally? And what would really make something pique your interest and say, hey guys, we should really take a look at this?
So for us, we hold each other accountable to not suffer from shiny object syndrome. Our technologists love shiny objects, and we run right after them. So for us, whenever we look at a new technology, we always try to make sure we understand what the business value is. Is it going to help us deliver infrastructure faster? Is it going to enable us to deliver infrastructure more consistently? Does it enable us to do things at a lower capital cost or operational cost? And it's important within my team especially for us to understand the business generates the dollars that you use to buy that infrastructure. So how do we keep up? We keep by reading SDX Central, Network World, we attend conferences, we're always reading and always learning, because you go with the mindset, you have to have the mindset of, I don't know everything, and I cannot know everything. So I also have to have trust in my team. As I mentioned earlier, I'm surrounded by people who are so much smarter than I
That's
am.
the best way to do it.
Because I know I'm not the smartest guy, and I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, because in the end that also creates a bottleneck around yourself,
Yep.
which prevents you from growing and transforming in your organization.
In that light, you mentioned trade shows and being able to consistently expose yourself to new ideas, new passions, and knowing that you're not the smartest person in the room. I can also imagine a person of your role likely gets a lot of sales calls. Good, bad, ugly, either way, you get a lot of them.
Yep.
And in your experience in your career, obviously there are great salespeople in our industry, and people that are a true value to men and women like yourself and business leaders like yourself. What makes a good sales call, and what makes a good sales partner?
So for me, what makes a good sales call or a sales partner is someone who does research before you come and speak to me about what my company is and what we do. I get a lot of cold calls asking if we're interested in buying, high-speed media accelerators. Okay, we're a financial services company. We're not Bloomberg. I don't see how you made that, assumption, right? So understand who we are and what our business is, so that you can speak to me intelligently about the value your product brings to our organization. And for me, it's also important that in the first 5-10 minutes, if you can't help me understand what your differentiator is, if you can't help me understand what the value is to your product, then chances are you're trying to push something to us based on what you think we need, which is the worst way. Start with why, not what, not how.
Yeah.
Starting with why lets me know that you're actually thinking about the outcome of what we're talking about.
It's fascinating. We had a meeting with my sales team this morning, and I read them a John Chambers quote. And obviously Cisco was so good for so long because of having a CEO sales leader such as him. And he said, listen to your customers, ask great questions, be invested in their success, and only sell what you need. And I thought that was one of the most resonating things that I could read as a sales leader, to be able to communicate with my sales team. There's a little anecdote at the end that he said he was talking to a customer, and they had a great relationship, for 5+ years. And he said that customer went to his team and said, you guys need to buy Cisco's new Indian project. And John Chambers said, he's like, I don't have a new Indian project. Well, he goes, well, me and my southern drawl thought, he said, the Cisco's new end-to-end project. Well, didn't matter to the customer. John said, you got to have this. And he said to his team, go get it. And that is, I was like, that's trust.
Yes.
And being able to see that, and that's listening, and that's being able to always, have the belief that your customers had the best interest in mind. Obviously, that's on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
In this day and age, obviously there are so many other vendors that have, come up against Cisco as valid competitors in enterprise class networking. If you were to go away from make an evaluation, how would that work within your environment? And kind of what are some of the things that you have to do to prove to management that, hey, this is a great fit for a product in our infrastructure?
So the first thing is we always do our homework. So it's important whenever we choose any new product, whether it's for data center, SD-WAN, public cloud, automation, containers, security, whatever it is. We make sure that we've got business, so we do a clear separation between functional requirements and technical requirements. So the functional requirements are what enable the business to meet the outcomes that they ask for. The technical requirements are the things that actually say, okay, based on what you're trying to do, here's a latency number we need to match for a particular credit card transaction or banking transaction. Therefore, I need something that has from Ethernet port to Ethernet port this minimum latency between them, so that I can create that as a technical requirement based on the functional requirement. So we make sure to document those technical and functional requirements, and then go and test the vendors that we select based on them. We also make sure that we present the vendors what our use cases are, not how do you think we would use your product? Or even worse, where the vendor shows up, goes, I have this thing, how do you think you can use it? And that tells me right away that the vendor themselves doesn't understand what their product does if you're asking me how you can use it.
How could you deploy
Right.
this?
How can you deploy my product? So doing that, performing proof of concept testing, and then doing value-driven decisions based on the functions, based on the technical requirements, are what lead us to making those decisions, whether it's Cisco or Arista or Juniper or Palo Alto or Dell or Mellanox, or I could go on forever.
Like I said, there's a lot these days.
There's a lot these days, right? That's only the switching vendors, right? In looking at those, it's important to understand throughout the landscape, everything is going to change every few minutes. That is the only constant in our industry, is everything is always changing. So going based on function first, not technology first, is critical, because chances are you choose a specific technical set of solutions. When you go to implement, completely different.
Yeah. And I can imagine, even that in itself is a long vetting process. Trying to do something in an organization the size of yours, I can imagine it's not even like trying to turn the Titanic. It's like trying to turn the Titanic on an ice skate.
Yeah, while you're wearing, slippers that are covered in oil and you're being hit with a stick from behind. Yeah, absolutely. But that's a critical piece as well, right? So looking at the outcome, looking at the functions, not focusing on the technology. So I'll give you a perfect example. We're in the process of deploying a multi-cloud backbone infrastructure. The POCs were conducted last year, okay? And we're in the process of doing the deployment now. Therefore, in the year since we've done our initial POC up to now, the vendor landscape has changed. The vendor technical features that we tested last year have advanced. I'm not going to pivot. I'm not going to change direction unless something substantially changes the functional value of what I'm getting. And that's because the functional value is what I was driving towards, not the how fast can you encrypt the traffic going in and out of the cloud. I asked that question a year ago with the assumption that that's going to change in the next year. It's going to get better. It's going to get faster. Show me your roadmaps, show me your plans. But again, because our sales cycle in any large enterprise like ours is at least a year, that keeping that in mind is a big piece.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears a little bit for a moment. I want to talk a little bit personally about your career and kind of the evolution of how we've gotten here today. January 2000, one of the first CCIEs kind of christened as our industry boomed. How did getting an achievement like that so young in career, you feel set yourself up for success and kind of the run that you've gone on?
So I got my CCIE January 9th, 2000, 5449. I just passed my 20-year emeritus. Thank you, Cisco. I finally don't have to pay every year to renew my emeritus status. Anyway, putting that aside, I got my CCIE certification while I was a Cisco instructor. I actually got my start in this industry working on a help desk and doing support for Microsoft support. Putting aside the CCIE, I got my MCSC in May of 1996.
Cool.
Actually, sorry, 95, right when Windows 95 came out. So yeah, really old man doing this for a long time. I used to have hair like you, but not anymore.
Well, you said 19 MS-DOS and I'm playing
yes, PC-DOS, MS-DOS, DR-DOS, all of those. I had them all. Anyway, so what I always challenge myself with is starting with the assumption I don't know everything. Starting with the assumption that in order to keep going in our industry, I always need to be looking at what's coming next, what's down the road, and doing that based on the value, the resource, the revenue that whatever it is coming down the pipe can generate. I've always been, since I was from the New York, New Jersey area, in the financial services industry. So the motto since I started my career was better, faster, cheaper. And cheaper didn't always mean look for a product that costs less, but look for something that generates more value than the same product you used to buy yesterday. And better, focusing on better delivery, better outcomes, and faster because we need to increase the velocity because we need to be competitive. In the financial services industry, it was always interesting because there we viewed technology as an asset. We viewed our infrastructure
Very forward-thinking back then.
Yes, as a differentiator rather than just a cost on some spreadsheet.
Absolutely. You were in the financial services industry during 9/11.
Oh, wow.
I can imagine that forward-thinking mindset of infrastructure as an asset really served that industry well during that time and probably made you a very critical piece of the puzzle and recovering and getting back up to speed.
Yeah, so I can vividly remember 9/11. I was actually working at Merrill Lynch at the time in our campus in Hopewell, New Jersey. We had a building, so we were in the World Financial Center. We had one data center there, and we had a data center on the west side, the West Village in Manhattan, and they were within 1.5 miles of each other.
Incredible.
And nowadays, you would never build a data center within 1.5 miles of your other
Things you
data
learned
center.
in 20 years.
But back then, you never considered something like that happening. So when the PATH train underneath the World Trade Center went into the water, it took 33 Thomas Street with it, which was where almost all circuits and everything came in before it went across the water over to New Jersey.
Yeah.
So the fact that we had a data center in the West Village and our other data center in the World Financial Center, we were dead in the water for quite a while completely in both data centers until, interestingly enough, we started setting up satellite communication over to our building in Jersey City, which was really cool, going straight across the Hudson. We were up on the roof of Jersey City. 101 Hudson is 39 stories high, up on the roof, setting satellite dishes up so we could beam data back and forth across what very, very cutting edge back then, very cool. But we had to be up and running again. I think the SEC gave us something like 72 hours before the fines would start kicking in.
That's incredible.
And we did it, but it took a lot of late nights. After that, we ended up building a brand new data center in Staten Island, and we had to build it in a month. Because once we were up and running, the next thing we were sitting on our heads was for DR capability, not 1.5 miles from where you are today. So we built in Staten Island, so I had lived literally in the data center, sleeping on cots and whatnot for a month, and it was exciting. One of the most exciting things I've ever done for the worst reasons in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, talk about the pressure to succeed, the pressure to perform. You're pretty battle hardened for the rest of your career.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And nothing else compares to that. And the relationships we created from going through that. My sales engineer from Arista is someone who I worked with during that time, was another engineer at Merrill Lynch at the same time, and we talk about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the folks that I'm still in relationship with today are folks that I met during that era.
That's incredible. I'll close, with this. When we first met a couple months ago, you had said, Brian, I love networking. I'm passionate about, what I do and the people that are involved in it. But I'm also very social. I love talking to people. I love talking with people about what I do, the industry that we're involved with, and obviously that's kind of led you to your leadership position within, Florida Network User Group. Tell me a little bit about your passion for the industry, your passion for working with other people, and being able to create something like Florida Node.
So a man, one of my mentors actually works at Juniper, said to me, find what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Find what makes you happy and everything else will come from that. So what makes me happy is having a disproportionate amount of influence when compared to the amount of intellect or the number of people that I actually am.
Yeah.
And I find that I have that by being open-minded, by being always in a collaborative and communicative state, and never believing that I can be most successful by keeping all the monkeys on my back and working like this. And I find speaking at user groups, I do it because I get to meet people with so many different experiences. I get to share my experiences with those people and find out what other companies are doing, find out what our vendors are doing, in a much more open and relaxed forum.
And that's exactly what it is. It's been awesome to be able to create that environment. I'm very grateful to have that environment here in Tampa this week.
And we appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're definitely looking forward to these chats more often, and our next event, I believe, is going to be in Orlando. So if you're an Orlando network engineer or passionate about the industry, or just like to meet Michael and kind of pick his brain on some of the things that we talked about here today, we would love to meet you. But Michael, thank you very much for joining us today.
Appreciate it.
It was
Great
fun,
talk.
and looking forward to seeing you guys all in the future.